In today's episode, no OT allowed and constantly invade my personal time? Okie dokie. You don't want us to work here with that attitude? Okay. Do not leave your luggage unattended. So let's get started. No OT allowed and constantly invade my personal time? Okie dokie. I still work for the same company, so I'll be semi-vague with the specifics. Years ago I had a boss that was interesting. He was usually a decent guy to be around, and was good at some of the particulars of the job, but when it came to the day-to-day stuff he was just clueless, and or admittedly didn't care about pitching in since he knew everyone else could cover it. When he wasn't busy, or was stressing about something, he really liked just hanging around and chit-chatting, even if we were very busy or, in my case, on my lunch break. I'd asked him repeatedly not to come find me on my breaks, which I took outside, and talk my ear off as it's the only personal time I get in the day, and I'd really rather not be bothered by anything work-related during. It's important to note that every position in the company below his is hourly. At this point I was a few steps down the ladder from his position. During one of these interruptions he mentions an unpleasant call he just had with his boss, and asks if I want to hear about it. I told him no, not particularly. I'd like to finish eating, go for a walk, and read for a bit. Then when I come back, clock in, and am an actively working employee, I'd be game to talk about it as much as you'd like. Even when he was either grating on our nerves, or making inappropriate jokes/comments, one thing I'll give him is that we could show some frustrations by making direct comments like that and he'd actually take the hint, sort of, apologize and back off. By the time I came back from break he'd gathered all the FT staff, and made a show of how I made them wait. Then he goes on a tirade about OT, and how we're not to get a minute of it going forward. This is immediately after his demand we all work open-close for the last 2 weeks during our busy season, which is roughly 12 to 13-hour days. Exhausting? Yes, but I relied on that OT for years. We have multiple busy seasons a year, to put into savings as the pay otherwise was okayish. He also routinely asks me to stay a bit past my scheduled time to help with things, so already I'm thinking this could mean I'll be able to make up the potential OT by leaving early on Fridays. Cue malicious compliance. Going forward I start ending my lunch breaks, usually an hour, the moment either he or anyone else finds me for a work-related question. I'll walk back inside, clock in, and then discuss whatever they'd like. I'd then say I'm taking my paid 15 to 20 minute break to go finish my food and take a shorter walk, and wouldn't clock back out again to finish the actual unpaid hour break, since it was interrupted, HR violation, which I documented. I'd always stay after my shift was supposed to end if he or anyone else needed a hand. I was good friends with the delivery folks on our route, and they'd start coming later and later to do our pickups to help me pad out my time and claim traffic was getting so bad in the area, since they all thought he was a twat anyway, and I was ostensibly put in charge of deliveries/pickups for some reason. By Thursday evening I'd look at my timesheet and calculate when I need to leave the following day to avoid any OT, which I'd make sure everyone was aware of so there'd be no surprises. Of course they were always surprised when I'd abruptly end a conversation, or stop helping a customer, etc., and just pack up and walk out the door. It got to the point where I'd show up at 7, I was the opening manager, this is retail, no one else would show up until 8:39, and then I'd be leaving around 10 a.m. Eventually I stopped coming in on most Fridays at all, and told the boss he'd have to open as I wasn't willing to come in for literally 1 hour before leaving again, and as I'm well beyond meeting what I need to do to keep FT status I'd just lose that hour or stay extra late the night before if need be to hit 40 on the dot. It got to a point where he initiated a conversation involving HR on my leaving so early on days we need Li-Fi moonlight, and how I was abusing the system. When the HR rep said this was a fairly serious allegation, and what I had to say in response, I pulled out my notebook with daily breakdowns showing what I actively did during chunks of time, including timestamps for beginning-end, interrupted lunch breaks, and the content of the interruption, extra projects put on me, and how that extended my day, etc. They looked it over for all of 3 to 4 minutes before sighing, handing it back, and telling me I could go. Ironically, right after the meeting ended, I had to rush to go clock out, or I'd have been on OT and left. That Monday my boss tries to play it off like I got away with it once, but don't try it again, but is being very cautious regarding asking for help, for things that are his direct responsibility anyway, and only came out one further time to talk to me on lunch before seeing my notebook next to me and sheepishly walking away. The OT ruling came and went for years, so I'd either keep mysteriously racking up extra time to leave early, delayed pickups for our shipments, or would work open close of my own choosing when they randomly decided they didn't care about OT for a few months. Either way, I was never bothered regarding how I fluctuated with my schedule again. You don't want us to work here with that attitude? Okay. Many years ago, when I was at university, I got a summer job renovating squash courts. The company was basically the boss, more about him to follow, a van containing all the required equipment, and me and my friend, Rod. He'd started work for John, the boss, first. He needed another guy, recommended me, and boom, I was in. It wasn't a bad job for a summer job. We traveled around the UK, working on squash courts. We'd either paint them, which required scaffolding so we could repaint the lines. The white paint we'd do with really long roller poles, use pneumatic hammers, kangos, to remove the front wall. The plaster goes dead after a while, apparently, or rip up the floors. In the latter two cases, the boss would then employ skilled subcontractors to replace the floor or wall. So, the work was basically unskilled but pretty physical. The pay was good for a student, and we got to drive around the country in a van, stay in cheap hotels, which seemed pretty glamorous at the time, and go out for beers most nights plus save cash for my next term. Sweet. The boss was pretty posh for someone with such a small business. Maybe he had others, or maybe this paid really well. I don't know, but he lived in a huge house in an expensive part of town, drove a Jaguar, his kids went to private school, and called him Pater. He was okay but a bit of a dick. One Friday, we got up early in one town, can't remember where, near London somewhere, worked flat out to finish a job, driven 2 hours to the next one, got set up for that, and then broke for lunch. Because we were new in this town, we set out to find a fish and chip shop. Staying in hotels obviously meant we couldn't make lunch to take in. It took a while to find one, and when we did they were just cooking some fresh chips we had to wait to be served. So we did, ate them, and went back. We'd been gone about 50 minutes. When we got there, John was there. He'd come to make sure that we had arrived okay, this was pre-mobile, and that everything was going as planned. He wanted to know where we'd been. Lunch, we told him. But we'd been gone over 40 minutes, he said. We explained. He said that wasn't good enough. We said that we'd started work early, driven 2 hours, had to find the place, wait for the chips, etc. We were working hard and that this A, wasn't our fault and B, wasn't unreasonable. He told us that if that was the kind of attitude we had, then maybe we shouldn't be working for him. He then left. We finished the job and repacked the van. It contained scaffolding, pneumatic drills, painting equipment, and so on. It had to be packed like Tetris to make sure it was organized and accessible. We took turns opening the door, the other one chucking stuff in, and then slamming it shut before it all fell out. We drove back to John's where we left the van when based at home. We collected our pay and handed him the keys. See you Monday for the Bracknell job, he said. Oh, no, sorry, we said. We had new jobs on Monday, we had. Rod and I were both lifeguards and had called some contacts and got pool work for the following week. It was crappy and didn't last long, but hey, I was a student and didn't care much. But, I don't understand, said John. Well, you said that if we had an attitude like we did at lunchtime, then maybe we shouldn't work for you. We do, and so we don't. And we left. Felt great. Do not leave your luggage unattended. This takes place in late 2001/early 2002, so I am a little fuzzy on the details, but the main details are true. It was just a few months after the 9/11 tragedy and the first time my husband and I had flown since the events of that day. We went to LA, a trade show for the industry he works in, and flew in and out of LAX. Everyone was still nervous about flying, and it seemed the rules about what you could and couldn't take on the plane changed weekly. I think they were saying to allow 2 or 3 hours at the airport before your flight time to check in and go through security. A shuttle service was to pick us up at our hotel and get us to the airport for our return trip. They weren't allowing the recommended time, which made me nervous, and on top of that they were late showing up, leaving us only about an hour to check in and get through security. There was a long line to check in and a lot of grumbling around us. Every 2 minutes there was an announcement about not leaving your baggage unattended, and to notify security if you see unattended baggage. 3 or 4 guys who had been on our shuttle were in line behind us, and were going to our city as well, and we all thought we were going to miss our plane. Finally, my husband and I were next in line. Suddenly, here comes Karen pushing her way to the front of the crowd. She was dressed in a hot pink tracksuit with bling on it and a matching baseball cap. She had a big pink and black leopard print rolling suitcase, a matching tote bag, and 2 matching small suitcases. Several people protested, telling her where the back of the line was. "I don't care, I am going to XXXX, my plane leaves in 30 minutes. I told her, "So are we and we are next." She didn't care, she pushed past me, and went running up to the next window, and they waited on her as several of us yelled our protests. The window next to Karen's opened, so we stepped up to it. I noticed Karen put her ticket into her tote bag, not bothering to step aside so the next person could get up to check in. Of course, she was carrying on 2 small suitcases in her tote bag, because she didn't care that you weren't allowed that many carry-ons. I then watched her pick up the 2 suitcases and run off toward her gate, leaving her tote bag behind. I looked over at the guys who had been on our shuttle, and they saw the tote as well. We grinned at each other. As one of them stepped up to that counter, he told the rep that there was an unattended bag. She leaned over and recognized it as Karen's. "Oh, I am sure that lady will be right back for it." "Cue malicious compliance," the guy said, "but what if she left it here on purpose?" I chimed in, "Aren't we supposed to notify security?" The guy from the shuttle said, "Yes, that is what the announcement keeps saying." He waved to a security guard who was at the end of the counter just a few feet away. The security guard took the bag and sped off down the hall on one of those golf cart things. As my husband and I were headed down the hall to go through security, we saw Karen racing back toward the check-in counter. We made our flight, as did the guys from our shuttle. We were the last ones to board. Karen did not make it. Karen's giant suitcase made it. I saw it on the luggage turnstile when we arrived home. I have no idea what she had to go through to get her bag back or to get on another flight. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.